Welcome to Win with the Law with your host, Gary Newland. In the Win with the Law podcast, your host, Gary Newland, partner at Newland & Newland LLP, invites guests who are experts in the personal injury law arena and other areas of law of interest to discuss topics relevant to the general public. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, newlandlaw.com. Now here's the host of Win with the Law, Gary Newland.
Welcome to Win with the Law. Learn how to navigate the legal landscape and end up on top with the help of the legal community's most prominent lawyers. My name is Gary Newland, a trial lawyer with Newland & Newland LLP from Chicago, Illinois. We will discuss issues and strategies for success so those listening can be empowered to achieve successful outcomes when it comes to legal challenges. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Tom Hargrove, an attorney that is called upon as an expert for his expertise in insurance-related litigation. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Gary.
Tom, if you could please tell me about yourself and what makes you qualified with respect to the insurance industry.
In 1980, I started out working in the claim department of an insurance company. And I spent the next 14 years working as a line adjuster, supervisor, or in various management positions within the claims department of 3 different insurance companies. My focus was primarily on property insurance claims, damage to buildings, and the stuff inside of them, and sometimes the stuff outside of them. I did that all over the United States as well as Canada and the Caribbean. I handled anything from a broken storm door to a burning high-rise building in a downtown setting. Once I did that, while I was at the end of that point, or end of that time, I went to law school. Once I graduated from law school, I represented insurance companies in that same area, property insurance claims primarily, as well as catastrophes such as fires, floods, and other sometimes man-made disasters. Did that for about 8 years, and once I completed that, I went into private practice in 2001, and since that time, I've been working representing policyholders in various issues involving insurance.
Now, Tom, so you've been on both sides. You've been on the side of the insurance company, and you've been on the side of the policyholder. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yep.
Now, with respect to the insurance industry, is it fair to say that at times they're more concerned about profit than following the terms of the policy for the benefit of their policyholders?
It would appear so, Gary, especially recently. I looked up some documents and did a little research last week, found out that the insurance industry in the United States lost collectively $32.5 billion in the first 9 months of 2023. That was a worsening of about $7 billion from the year before. And it doesn't show any signs of letting up. Now, this loss is a huge loss, came in the face of a 10% increase in premium rates. So while their revenue is going up, their losses are increasing. And this has been the situation with property casualty insurance in the United States, especially property, for about the past 10 or more years. They've lost money. So they're working hard to resist and limit the claim payments they make. That's been my experience anyway.
Now, Tom, I'd like to thank you because as a trial lawyer, I've relied upon your experience and expertise, and you've consulted me in cases with respect to insurance, and thank you. You're
Yes.
Big help. With respect to, for our listeners, can you explain what the different types of insurance are?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds, and we could spend several hours talking about the different kinds and how they get involved. For purposes of the consumer audience and the limit of time we have, we're going to talk primarily of what's called property and casualty insurance. And that's the property that protects your home, protects your auto, and protects your legal liability in the event of an accident. So for the home consumer, the primary kinds that you're going to see are an auto policy that protects your automobile, and then a homeowner's policy or a renter's policy, which protects your home and the stuff inside of it, and as well as the stuff that you own that may be away from the home, or in your kid's dorm room while they're in college, or in your suitcase while you're traveling. And then
It's interesting that you said that. Some people think of homeowners insurance only impacting what goes on inside the home. Can you explain, as reasonably as you can, what homeowners insurance is and the benefit of what's called an umbrella coverage?
Okay, well, a homeowner's policy is really three different kinds of insurance built in one. It's what's known in the industry as a package policy. So it covers, provides financial protection for you and your family for the things that you own and are subject to damage. This week in the Chicago area, we had a tremendous storm come through. According to the Weather Service, 11 tornadoes came down Tuesday night in the Chicago area. So there are thousands of people right now who are dealing with damaged roofs, damaged siding, broken windows, and in some cases, their homes or buildings have been destroyed. So it covers that kind of thing, the home and the stuff that's inside of it. And then it also covers liability that you may be exposed to. If you have a dog, sometimes dogs bite people, and it pays a claim that may be made against you. If someone comes to visit and they slip in your home and fall, it's going to pay for that. Some policies also include coverage for things like slander, such as defamation or different types of untruths that people say allegedly about others, and the lawsuits that result. And then the third time is really a voluntary medical payment. So if your friend comes over and visits and cuts themselves, and even though you didn't do anything wrong, they're helping you out in the kitchen, cut their hand on a knife, it'll pay the medical bills if they need to go to the hospital to get stitches, or if somebody falls down the stairs and hurts themselves, it will pay for that. So those are the three main things that a homeowner's policy pays for. And then an umbrella is just an additional amount of insurance on top of what we call the primary insurance that's provided by the homeowners. Most homeowners policies have $500,000 of liability insurance on them. Many people purchase an umbrella to increase that to $1 million, $2 million, or even $5 million of liability insurance, depending on who they are and what they've got to lose.
Interesting. Now, I can think of cases, we've had where we've had contractors fall off of roofs, dogs bite people, like you said. And also, I had one case where a woman wasn't looking where she was walking and knocked someone down at a casino.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we filed suit against that woman, and the homeowner's insurance kicked in. So there's many different types of claims homeowner's insurance can kick in for that people don't necessarily think about.
Right. And it depends on the insurance company too. Some insurance companies have much broader coverage than others.
Well, what should someone do when they incur a loss or suspect that they have a loss that is related to their homeowner's insurance coverage?
Well, every policy has a section in it called duties in the event of loss. And that, whether that's a claim made against you or a claim you have. And the first thing that it says is that you have an obligation to notify the insurance company promptly when a loss occurs so that they can conduct an investigation. A failure to promptly notify them can result in them being excused from any responsibility to respond to the claim. So the first thing you need to do is notify them and give them particulars about what happened. And that's
a common way that insurance companies will try and get out of a situation if they didn't get noticed timely. Is that
yes,
right?
Yes. Yeah. In Illinois, there's a lot of technicalities around that, but the bottom line is this: is if you wait too long, you lose.
Yeah. I can think of a rule in Illinois that has come up a lot in my practice about notifying insurance companies. It has to do, I believe it's a 14-day rule about notifying the insurance company in case of a hit and run. So they have a
Yes,
special provision in the insurance policy.
yes. It's
And is that to prevent fraud?
it's
Or
to
why is it?
prevent, yeah, well, that's the primary reason behind it, is to
Yeah.
prevent fraud and to give them an opportunity to investigate. Um, in today's arena, there are cameras everywhere, but they only retain the data for so long. And if they're able to access traffic cameras or parking lot cameras or, premises cameras to see what happened, they want to be able to do that before the data is erased. And also, as you say, it's to prevent fraud.
You
There's a
know,
huge amount of fraud in that arena.
this is interesting. I've had many calls over the years from people that they call me and it seems like something's insurance related, and they've called their insurance company and the insurance company has just denied it outright.
Yes.
And so I tell them, and I don't know if this is the best advice, if you could refine it, um, contact them back and ask them where it says in the policy they're not responsible.
Yes. That's it. It is the insurance company's burden of proof, as we say in the law, to show where and how an exclusion applies. It's not the policyholder's obligation, it is the insurance company's obligation. So if they're going to invoke an exclusion, they have an obligation to clearly explain where it is in the policy and how it applies to that particular scenario.
I can't tell you how many times over the years a client has called me back and said, oh, all of a sudden they're taking responsibility once I asked that question. So I think it's a key question that our listeners should remember, because a lot of times I think too, the adjusters don't even know if it's covered, but they just say things, or and they're in the practice of saying certain denials when in fact they should be accepting it. And they're not necessarily lying. They just really don't know.
Yes. Yeah. I read a letter this week from an insurance company attempting to deny liability for a loss, and it was a homeowner's policy. They were citing an exclusion that related to liability claims as if it was involved on the property side of things. That particular exclusion did not apply to this loss scenario, but the adjuster was misquoting it and misapplying it. And fortunately, we were able to bark at them a little bit, and they straightened up.
Yeah, you actually get them to read the policy and know they're accountable, then sometimes they'll adjust their position, I think.
Yeah, they often will just make stuff up, and you see it now, but I can tell you it's been going on as long as I've been involved, which is more than 40 years. That hasn't changed.
And I have such a hard time, even as an attorney with over 30 years experience, reading an insurance policy and
Yeah, they're hard to
understanding
read.
it clearly.
Yeah, I'm kind of strange that way. I used to help write them before I started practicing law, and even after I started practicing law, I would review them for insurance companies before they were issued. And there's an art to it, and there's an art in really getting an understanding of how they're put together. Once you do that, they often make a lot of sense. I mean, I understand how they work, but I've been doing it for so long, and I do it every day, that it's a little weird. One of the biggest problems I see over and over and over again is that people buy an insurance policy and don't have any idea of what it covers and what it doesn't cover. And they assume that coverage is provided for things that simply aren't there. And that can be anywhere from, an item is stolen that's not covered, or a call I received from a fellow this week whose home burned down, and he's about $300,000 short of the amount of money he needs to rebuild his home. So, there's a variety of issues. And I asked that guy, I said, have you ever read your insurance policy? He said, I've never looked at it. I went to
Yeah.
the insurance agent. I said, I need insurance. They asked me a bunch of questions. I got a policy in the mail a week later. And I never even looked at it. So,
that's an interesting issue because, I do this too. Even as an attorney, I do rely upon my agent. Is there such a thing as agent malpractice?
yes, there is. There's a specific statute that talks about it in Illinois. They used to be called agents and brokers. That changed a few years ago. Now they're all called producers.
I see.
Okay. The common people still call them agents and brokers, but legally they're all called producers.
So a producer, they use it. Why do they use the term producer when describing them?
You'd have to ask the legislature for that. But the reality is they're the ones that are the go-between between the insurance company and the consumer, commercial or individual. They're the ones that cause the policies to be produced. So they've always been called insurance producers as long as I've been involved.
No, I've had a strange circumstance. Usually the insurance companies have their own attorneys.
They often do, yes.
Numerous times where the insurance companies have, where I've been paid to defend somebody by the insurance company, even though I don't do insurance defense. Like a client will come in and ask me to defend them over the insurance company's lawyer or someone else. So why do they allow me to bill and charge the insurance company to defend the insured?
Well, in some situations, they're required to do that. In Illinois, and it's true in every state's a little bit different, but in Illinois, we call them Pepper's Counsel. And that's because of the name of a case, I believe from the 1970s, where the insurance company had a conflict of interest when it hired its own attorney to defend a fellow in a claim. And the fellow was concerned that the attorney hired by the insurance company wasn't going to do his best to represent him, and that he would put his finger on the scale, so to speak, to help the insurance company. In this case, there were allegations of negligence where a guy had unintentionally caused an injury, as well as allegations that the injury had been caused intentionally, which is not covered by the policy. And he was concerned that the evidence would come in, as they say, in a manner that helped the insurance company evade or avoid liability. That resulted in the Pepper's Doctrine, which allows policyholders to name their own attorney if there's a conflict of interest.
So can you explain in more detail how an insurance company and their insured can be in a conflict of interest?
Well, it's typically where insurance policies don't cover everything. Okay, if you read a modern insurance policy, especially the liability, the insuring agreement, as we call it, is typically 1 or 2 paragraphs long. And then the next 12 pages of the insurance policy are exclusions and limitations. So there are many claim scenarios, loss scenarios, where depending on how the facts are developed and applied to a certain situation, the claim may be covered or it may not be covered. And the policyholder, of course, wants the claim to be covered so that the insurance company will pay for it if it's determined that he or she is liable. The insurance company, on the other hand, may be more interested in determining that the claim is not covered, so they don't have to write a big check at the end. And that's where the conflict arises. So in those situations in Illinois, the insured can get their own attorney. And it can also be when there's situations of inadequate insurance. In other words, policy limits aren't high enough to cover the potential loss.
You know what? I've had a situation pop up, and it at times is very concerning, where you have the person that causes the crash and the person that's the victim of the crash have the same insurance company.
Yes.
For instance, State Farm on the defendant's side and the plaintiff's side. It always concerns me because at first the person who's injured and not at fault is trusting the company to do the right thing because they think, oh, it's my company, when in fact that company has an inherent conflict of interest, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, they do. I don't know that situation is going to trigger a Peppers obligation in all scenarios, but in some it might. Okay.
What does a person do when their insurance company is also representing the other side? How can they protect themselves?
Well, they need to consult an independent attorney who, to look at the situation and see if everything is going as it should and that their rights are protected.
Yeah, I see that. It seems to me that they're recording conversations. Um, they're asking questions. I'm sure they're writing things down. And one misstatement could put someone in an adverse situation. So it is a time to be very careful and
It's
lawyer up.
yes. As we say, it's very difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once you say something, you've said it. And I have on many occasions been contacted by people before they contact the insurance company. They realize there's a terrible situation involved. Maybe there's been a death. Maybe someone has been drinking too much while they're operating an automobile, or a variety of other circumstances. And they want counsel before they contact the insurance company to explain how things go. And they want someone sitting next to them to help them from saying the wrong thing when they speak to their insurance company. And I've done that on many occasions.
There's another issue that I've been seeing a lot lately. Well, for years now, and it has to do with the amount of insurance coverage. So I'll have a situation where in Illinois, you're required to have $25,000 worth of insurance for liability in a car accident,
Yes.
which really isn't
Minimum.
enough to cover the emergency room in today's times.
Yes.
But when someone has 25, oftentimes we're looking at our clients' underinsured coverage.
Yes.
Now, that means then that eventually their own insurance company is going to be in opposition to them.
Yes.
And again, that's a time they're not anticipating that because they're thinking, I was in a crash. They're talking to their insurance company freely, not realizing that their insurance company may ultimately be liable under the underinsured or uninsured provision later on. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely. You have to be very careful at all times when you talk to your insurance company following a loss. You know, there's a lot of slogans that insurance companies use. I'm not going to mention any of them here. We know what they are. But they are advertising slogans. And the reality is, when you're in a claim scenario with your insurance company, 90% of the time it's an adversarial relationship.
And it seems, although I'm not sure it's in the law at all, you might know, but they should provide a warning. Hey, you know what? Where there is a conflict here, we want you to be aware of it. But I don't hear that coming. I don't see that in my cases that they've advised my clients in advance. Are you aware of any law that would support that?
Yeah, I mean, there is case law. There isn't a statute per se, but there are, that I'm aware of. There is case law that requires the insurance company to, analyze this as it goes along. Unfortunately, many of the people who are handling the claims in the insurance companies, the claim handlers, adjusters, whatever you want to call them, we call them claim handlers, don't always have the experience, nor do their first line supervisors have the experience to recognize a conflict while it's occurring. And I don't, I I can't say that I've ever seen a scenario where the insurance company was well aware of the conflict, and ignored it and actually played it to its advantage, um, because the outfall from that can be financially horrible for them. But I've certainly seen it done where they don't realize it's happening, and it creates problems for the policyholder later on.
Now, for instance, my firm, we've been involved in bad faith litigation. Can you explain to the listeners what bad faith litigation is?
Bad faith is a cause of action. It's typically been created by courts. Okay, it's not a statute, where the insurance company treats their policyholder so badly that the law provides a remedy for them to obtain damages, and sometimes punitive damages, when the insurance company treats them badly. And in Illinois, there's a statutory limit on some types of bad faith. There's a lot of reasons behind it, primarily because Illinois is the home to several of the largest insurance companies in the country. And they have a very powerful lobby in Springfield. And that law was created. It's a very unique law. I am not aware of anyone like it anywhere else in the United States, but it essentially protects the insurance company financially from doing horrible things. So
I've noticed in some of our crash cases where there's an automobile crash, we're getting more than the policy at trial.
yes,
And can that be evidence of bad faith?
it can, if the insurance company was aware, based on the entirety of the circumstances, that there was a likelihood or a strong possibility that a jury would render a verdict in excess of the policy limits. They had an opportunity to settle the case before trial for an amount within policy limits, but they take the attitude of, we don't care, it's not our money anyway, let's go to trial. And that can render them responsible for bad faith in Illinois.
What does mass loss mean to you?
Well, there's different kinds. I deal primarily with broken stuff. Okay, you deal primarily with broken people. And mass losses would be like food poisoning, or we've gotten issues like the Roundup cases that are going on with the fertilizer. Now we have the talcum powder cases with, is it Johnson & Johnson, or and stuff like that, where you've got an asbestos claims, you've got faulty medical implant devices, stuff like that, where one situation is the genesis of hundreds, if not thousands, and sometimes millions of claims. That's a completely different animal. When I look at it from the property side of things, I think of it as a hailstorm or a tornado or flooding or a hurricane or something like that, where hundreds or thousands of buildings in a given geographical area are damaged, or in some cases destroyed. I've worked on hurricanes when I was with insurance companies, where the Hurricane Andrew in 91 or 92 pretty much destroyed the entire town of Homestead, Florida. The adjusters that I know who went in there, they'd leave the area because there was no cell service or anything, and they call and say, there aren't even street signs left. I mean, it's just flat. So that's what I call it. We call those catastrophes in our side of the business. But yeah, we have all kinds of stuff like that. It's I worked on it, or I was indirectly involved in a case where a truck hit a bridge. Unfortunately, the bridge was for a railroad track, and it abutted a river. While the truck driver was still sitting there scratching his head, a train came by, and it was carrying tank cars full of bad stuff. They derailed, went down into a ravine, burst open, and filled a river stream with bad stuff that caused 2 towns downstream to be evacuated. That's a mass claim too.
So, and then basically, corporations have insurance for these
Yes.
catastrophic type
Yes.
things.
Yes, they do. Often not enough, but in this case they did. It was a large company that had a lot of insurance.
I've noticed that we do a lot of food poisoning and
Yes.
other sorts of mass tort, and
You've made
I've
me
noticed that
frightened to eat at certain restaurants.
it's so I've noticed that one of our issues is, and this is unfortunate, and this happens in auto accidents too, but sometimes the insurance coverage is not enough to make people whole under the law, and that's tragic.
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, there's a variety of circumstances behind that, and part of them are people. Number one, a lot of people don't understand insurance. Okay. Uh, all of us who went through school during our generation learned about what a rhomboid is. Okay. But nowhere during any of our classes did we talk about an insurance policy and or how to balance a checkbook. So it's simply that people don't understand insurance, don't know what they need. They shop for insurance by price only. They don't get involved with an insurance agent who takes the time to help them understand what they need and properly advise them. And in the case of the businesses you've talked about, they end up with not nearly enough insurance when there's a mass food poisoning case.
If I could ask you one more question before we wrap things up. Recently, there's been a lot of storms, as you indicated earlier.
Yes.
What should people do when they suspect a hail damage or storm damage specifically?
Well, if they're able to, they should inspect their home. Tomorrow morning, it's going to be a little warmer than it's been. And the first thing I'm going to do is go up on the roof of my home and look at it to see if I've got wind damage shingles or hail damage shingles, because we got a little bit of hail the other night. If they're not capable of doing it themselves, they should call someone they trust to do it. A roofing company, a local roofing company. Whenever there's a storm, there's a class of people now that are called storm chasers, and they are freelance, somewhat gypsy roofing companies that hear about a storm, they go into the area, they offer to help you with your insurance claim, and so on and so forth. You don't work with someone like that. Only bad things will happen. They may have a local phone number because they've gone to and got a local cell phone to do business. But what you want to do is look at the license plates on their truck and see if they're from Illinois, and then look at the sign on the truck to see if it's a magnetic sign that's not on there straight, because they're new to the area and don't know what they're doing. But
Some
you
of the
need to
storm
have
chasers, though, are actually do provide a service. You're warning people to stay away from the fly-by-nights. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Nothing good will come of them. And insurance companies used to send someone out to examine the roofs, and many of them now say, send us pictures. So it's up to you to take care of it yourself.
So, Tom, I'd like to have you on again sometime. I hope you're willing to do that. I want to thank
Yeah.
you.
My pleasure.
Signing off now from Arlington Heights, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, and I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of Win with the Law. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
You've been tuning into Win with the Law with your host, Gary Newland. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, newlandlaw.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.